Good afternoon, everyone. I'm quite intimidated to be standing here in this room full of people that started the stewardship program. Only been here for like 2 years, but I'll be looking at the contribution to conservation targets of vegetation types through the stewardship program, and I did this work with Derek Ratis. Just to give you a brief background to the stewardship program in KZN. KZN as a province, it's approximately 9.4 million hectares. And the stewardship program started in 2006, I believe. And in 2008, there was a study that was done, and it was determined that KZN protected areas equals to about 197,000 hectares, which is about 8.1% of the province. And Ezemvelo, and those protected areas are about 101 in total. So then what subsequently happened after that was determined was a study that was done on important biodiversity in KZN, and it was established that about 53% of important biodiversity occurs in private and communal land, which is outside the state protected areas. So this 53% is outside the 850,000 hectares that we see above. So then it was estimated that in order to secure the important biodiversity, about 14.5% of the province will require formal proclamation to secure the important biodiversity in the province. So this map just shows you the red stuff is the priority conservation areas, and the blue stuff is the stewardship sites, and the green will be your state protected areas. So then, how does the stewardship program fit into the background that I've alluded? As I did say, that the program was initiated in 2006, and the goal in 2008 for the program was to develop mechanisms and partnerships to protect important biodiversity assets outside state protected areas. So to date, I would just give you statistics of what the program has achieved since the first proclamation in 2009. So far, we've proclaimed 28 nature reserves, which total to about 75,000 hectares. 6 protected environments, would total to about 90,000 hectares, and that is that makes up about 94,000 hectares. Keeping in mind what I said before about the protected areas in 2008, which is about 850,197 hectares. So we add those two, and then we get about 94,000 hectares, which has increased the 8.1% to 10.04%. So that's how much contribution to target the stewardship program has made in KZN. And this figure excludes the biodiversity agreements, which so far we have 4, and they are about 5,000 hectares. So now back to the vegetation types. I know my map is not the prettiest, but the reason why we put this map is so that we put you in the picture on the vegetation types that we have in KZN and where our proclaimed stewardship sites are located within the province. So the red stuff will be the proclaimed protected areas, and the other colors will be your vegetation types. My mouth is now dry. The method that we used was, first we determined the vegetation types within our stewardship sites. So we clipped the KZN vegetation layer, the 2011 one, which was the latest that we had, with the 28 proclaimed areas, the property boundaries as of the Gazette notices. And then we calculated the area per vegetation type, and then we minus the transformation using our latest transformation layer. And then we calculated, so that then led us to calculating the percentage contribution to conservation targets, which was the transformed extent divided by the conservation target times 100 to get the percentage. The targets that we used were the latest that we have, which are the December 2004 targets. Even though our first proclamation was in 2009, but we used the latest targets. So, and these are the results that we got. In KZN, we have about 101 vegetation types, of which the stewardship program has contributed to conserving about 34 of those. And then we have 6 biomes in KZN, and the stewardship program has contributed 5 of those biomes. And then the vegetation targets that are met, okay, so they in the data in the December 2014 data, there's a column which says vegetation which determines whether the vegetation targets are met in state protected areas, or so you give a yes or a no. So there are 75 no's and there are 26 yes. So the stewardship program has contributed. So of the 75 no's, the stewardship protected areas has contributed 29, and then to the vegetation layers that are already, where the targets are already made, we contributed 5. And then 5 of those were critically endangered, and another 5 were endangered, and 11 were vulnerable, and 13 were least threatened. So, and then maybe just to go back, and then in the next slides, I'll be showing you the summary of each conservation status. So I'll break down the results per conservation status. So the first one being the critically endangered. Can I take a glass of water because my mouth is dry? Thank you for that. The front one, okay. So in the critically endangered vegetation layer, the one that stood out the most to us was the alluvial wetlands, which even though 39% of it was transformed, so what we did was we calculated the area and then the transformation per vegetation type, and then this is the untransformed, the natural area of this vegetation type, and then the conservation target, and whether the target is met in the state protected areas or not. So as this one is as an example, we had about 18 hectares of this wetland, of which 7 of it is transformed. That's about 39%, and then the untransformed one that will contribute to the target is about 22%. So the contribution to target that we made through that vegetation type is 22%. And then the rest of them you can see for yourselves, but I only highlighted the ones that stood out the most to us. And then on the endangered one, the interesting thing was that we looked at was the Midland misspelled grassland, of which it was 57% of it is transformed. So that 57% would not contribute to target because it's already transformed. So the contribution to target is only 1.6%. So if it was natural, it would have contributed more, but because it's transformed, the contribution to target is very little. And then the vulnerable vegetation types. This was the highest contribution target that we have made through the stewardship program. It's the least transformed, and the contribution to target was the highest, it's sitting at 34%. And then lastly, the least threatened vegetation type. The interesting thing about this one was the fact that it's in the top 3 of the vegetation types that have contributed to target. So the contribution to target is the number 3 when we rank them, even though it's least threatened. The transformation was about 14%, and the contribution to target was 9.7%. And I'm not sure if you did pay attention that all of them that I've highlighted, neither of them have we met the target in our state protected areas. This table looks a bit, but the reason why I put this is so that it makes sense to you guys, and so that you can see how we ranked the contribution to target. I did say the highest was 34%, followed by the 22%, and the interesting thing is that the 22% is actually a critically endangered vegetation type. And then another interesting thing was this misspelled grassland. Its status is endangered, but it's sitting somewhere there in the middle. So we rank this, so the red ones will be our highest contribution to target, followed by the ones that are less than 10%, followed by the ones between 1% and 5%, and then below 1%. So in summary, I will give you the statistics of what that table was showing. So I did say that there are 34 vegetation types which the stewardship program is contributed to, and the average contribution was about 4%. The minimum being 0.01, which was the Ponderland scrub forest, which was sitting there at the bottom, and then the maximum contribution being 34%, which is the Zululand lowfield, and then the second highest being 22%, and the contribution to target between 5 and 10% were 7 vegetation types from that table, and then between 1 and 5%, 11 vegetation types, and less than 1% were the most, which were 14 vegetation types. And this happened between 2009, where we had our first proclamation, and 2015, where we met the 2014 target. So that's in 6 years. So now this map just shows you what we have proclaimed through the stewardship program. In red, this will be a Zululand rhino. I'm sorry that we didn't name these reserves we took it for granted that most people know about the stewardship program and are aware of our proclaimed site, which was the downside on our side. So this red, if you remember, the Zululand rhino will be where the Zululand lowfield vegetation type is, where we've contributed 34%. And then the orange will be the ones that are awaiting board approval. The interesting thing about this one is that you have your Zululand rhino here, which is now proclaimed, and you have your Tandanduna, which is now proclaimed. And in between them, you have the one that is awaiting board approval, which is the manga. And just in that cluster, we also have Pinda, which is in contract negotiation. So the blue is under contract negotiation, the red is proclaimed, the orangish is board approval, and then the pale green will be your state protected areas. So to date, we have about 56,000 hectares awaiting board approval. The board meeting, which is going to be in November this year, hopefully they will be approved then and proclaimed sometime beginning of next year. And that is 14 nature reserves. Don't be shocked by the small area and a large number of nature reserves. This is because 10 of those are the Tegwini reserves, which they are 10 reserves, but they are a total of about 900 hectares. And then we have 11,800 hectares, which is, the 14 are 11,800 hectares, and then one protected environment, which is about 41,000 hectares. I saw Sam, she's the one who's championing this one. It's in Elandsberg, near Utrecht. And then we have 2 biodiversity agreements. Please note that the biodiversity agreements do not contribute to conservation targets, but I did put them here so that you have an idea of an extent of an area that we are working on as a stewardship program. So, and then under negotiation, we have about 123,000 hectares, of which 14 of those are nature reserves that total about 100,500 hectares. And then we have 7 protected environments that total about 7,500 hectares, and 5 biodiversity agreements that are about 15,000 hectares. I'm not sure if it's just a coincidence or there is a higher power that every time there's a proclamation, it will be 14 nature reserves. So it was 14 nature reserves that were proclaimed between 2009 and 2013. And this year, we just proclaimed 14 nature reserves this year. And we have 14 nature reserves awaiting board approval. And we are negotiating 14 nature reserves. So this is a potential contribution to target. This is how much contribution we can make if we proclaim everything that is currently waiting board approval, and everything that we're currently negotiating. I would also like to acknowledge our partners. This work would not be possible just through Ezemvelo. We have a number of partners that we work with, stewardship implementers and funders and scientists and ecologists, and the whole suite of people that make this work possible for me to be reporting to you guys. Thank you very much. This is Zululand Law Firm in Babanato.